Hello everyone, Dr. Allan Mandell here. Good morning. I want you to listen very carefully because what I'm about to share could genuinely protect your brain, your heart, and your life after the age of 60. There is one very common mistake people make first thing in the morning, often without realizing it, that can silently triple the risk of stroke over time. And the most alarming part is that millions of seniors do this every single day, believing it's harmless. The mistake is starting your morning in a dehydrated state and delaying proper hydration, especially while consuming salty, processed, or sugary breakfast foods. After the age of 60, your body no longer signals thirst effectively. By the time you feel thirsty, you are already dehydrated. Overnight, your body loses water through breathing, sweating, and basic metabolic processes. Blood becomes thicker, circulation slows, blood pressure rises. This is not theory. This is physiology. Every morning, millions of people wake up believing they survived another night safely, unaware that their body is entering the most dangerous hour of the day, because while they were asleep, something silent and deadly was happening inside their blood. As you sleep, your body loses water with every breath you exhale, through microscopic sweating and through basic metabolic activity that never shuts off, not even for rest. By morning, especially after the age of 60, your blood is measurably thicker, your circulation is slower, and your heart is under stress before you even open your eyes. This is not opinion, this is documented physiology. Studies show blood viscosity increases significantly overnight, and thicker blood dramatically raises the risk of clot formation. That clot does not announce itself, it waits, it drifts, and it strikes when conditions are perfect. The early morning hours are exactly when strokes occur most often, not by coincidence, but because your body is biologically primed for vascular disaster at that time. Blood pressure naturally surges upon waking, platelets become stickier, and arteries that have lost elasticity with age struggle to handle the sudden demand. Now add dehydration to that equation, and you are multiplying the danger. After 60, the thirst mechanism weakens. You no longer feel thirsty even when your body is critically low on water. So people wake up and go straight for coffee, tea, or breakfast, unknowingly pouring fuel on a fire that has already started burning. Coffee further dehydrates. Tea acts as a mild diuretic, and most breakfast foods are loaded with sodium, even the ones marketed as healthy. Sodium pulls water out of your bloodstream, thickening it even more, forcing your heart to push harder through arteries that are already stiffened by age and inflammation. The inner lining of your blood vessels, called the endothelium, is extremely sensitive to dehydration. When it dries out, nitric oxide production drops sharply. Nitric oxide is the molecule that keeps arteries relaxed, open, and flexible. Without it, vessels constrict, blood pressure rises, and circulation to the brain is reduced. Reduced circulation to the brain is not just a risk factor for stroke, it is the trigger. Medical imaging studies reveal that even mild dehydration reduces cerebral blood flow, meaning your brain is receiving less oxygen exactly when it needs more to transition from sleep to wakefulness. This is why dizziness, confusion, and morning headaches are more common in older adults, and why these symptoms are often dismissed until a stroke occurs. The most shocking fact is that many strokes are not caused by sudden trauma, but by slow, repeated morning stress on blood vessels over years. One dehydrated morning does not cause a stroke, but thousands of them silently reshape your vascular system, hardening arteries, increasing clot potential, and weakening the brain's resilience. Researchers have documented that blood is at its thickest between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., the same window when stroke incidence peaks worldwide. This is not random. It is mechanical. It is chemical. It is preventable. The tragedy is that the simplest intervention, water, is often ignored. Not supplements, not medication, water. Proper hydration within minutes of waking has been shown to reduce blood viscosity, lower morning blood pressure, improve endothelial function, and restore cerebral circulation. Within 10 minutes, blood flow improves measurably. Within 30 minutes, strain on the heart decreases. Yet people delay this life-saving step, choosing routine over survival. They rush, they scroll, they sip caffeine, believing they will hydrate later, not realizing that later may be too late for a vessel already on the edge. As we age, arteries lose collagen, calcium deposits increase, and flexibility disappears. Dehydration accelerates this process by increasing friction inside the vessel walls. Think of thick oil forced through a narrow pipe under pressure. Eventually something gives way. That is a hemorrhagic stroke. Or the pressure pushes a clot into the brain. That is an ischemic stroke. Both are devastating, both are most likely in the morning, and both are strongly linked to hydration status. This is why hospitals quietly encourage stroke risk patients to hydrate upon waking, and why cardiologists warn about morning blood pressure spikes. But this message rarely reaches the public in a way that changes behavior, because water feels too simple to be powerful. But simplicity is exactly why it works. The body is mostly water, blood is mostly water. When water is missing, everything fails, especially the brain. The most dangerous part is that dehydration feels normal. You don't feel pain. You don't feel warning signs. You feel fine until you are not. And when a stroke happens, there is no rewind button. Independence disappears, speech disappears, mobility disappears, and families are left wondering how something so sudden could happen. It wasn't sudden. It was built quietly, one dry morning at a time. The solution does not require discipline, money, or medical expertise. It requires awareness. Before coffee, before food, before stress, one conscious act of hydration, slowly, intentionally, giving your blood the fluid it needs to flow instead of clot, to nourish instead of damage, to protect instead of destroy. This single habit shifts the odds back in your favor. Not tomorrow, immediately. The morning is not just the start of your day. After 60, it is the most important moment for your survival. And the choice you make in those first minutes may determine whether your brain continues to function freely or whether it becomes another statistic in a preventable tragedy. Every morning, without realizing it, millions of people place their lives in danger, not because of what they do wrong all day, but because of what they eat in the first few minutes after waking up. The most dangerous meals are not always greasy, oversized, or indulgent. Some of the most harmful foods for the aging brain are disguised as normal, even healthy, breakfast choices. Bread, cereal, cheese, packaged eggs, processed meats, spreads, sauces, and so-called light breakfasts are silently loaded with sodium. And sodium, when consumed early in the morning, acts like a biological detonator inside aging blood vessels. After 60, your kidneys no longer filter sodium efficiently. Excess sodium stays in the bloodstream longer, pulling water out of circulation and into surrounding tissues. This causes an immediate rise in blood pressure. That pressure does not gently increase, it spikes. Medical research shows that morning blood pressure surges are one of the strongest predictors of stroke, even in people whose blood pressure appears normal during the rest of the day. The body is already vulnerable in the morning. Cortisol is high, blood is thicker, arteries are less flexible. Adding sodium at this moment multiplies vascular stress dramatically. Sodium stiffens the arterial walls by disrupting endothelial cells, the thin inner lining responsible for regulating blood flow. Once damaged, these cells lose their ability to produce nitric oxide, the compound that keeps arteries open and elastic. Without nitric oxide, vessels constrict, circulation slows, and the brain receives less oxygen. Reduced oxygen to the brain is not just uncomfortable, it is dangerous. Brain cells are extremely sensitive to oxygen deprivation. Even short reductions increase the likelihood of clot formation and vessel rupture. Studies have shown that high sodium intake directly increases platelet aggregation, meaning your blood becomes stickier. Sticky blood is a stroke waiting to happen. And the most shocking fact is this: most people who suffer a stroke were not eating excessive salt by taste. The salt was hidden. One slice of bread can contain more sodium than an entire home-cooked meal. A single bowl of cereal can exceed safe morning limits. Processed breakfast meats can deliver nearly a full day's sodium before noon. When this happens in a dehydrated body, sodium concentrates in the blood like poison. This is why strokes so often occur in the early hours after breakfast. It is not random. It is chemical pressure applied at the worst possible time. Over years, repeated morning sodium spikes scar arteries from the inside. Microscopic tears form, calcium deposits settle, plaque hardens. The artery becomes narrow, brittle, and unstable. One sudden pressure surge is all it takes for a clot to break loose and travel to the brain. Imaging studies show that people with high morning sodium intake have significantly reduced cerebral blood flow compared to those who delay sodium until later in the day. This reduced flow starves brain tissue and accelerates cognitive decline long before a stroke ever occurs. Memory loss, confusion, balance issues, and slow reaction times are early warning signs of vascular damage, not normal aging. Yet they are ignored because they arrive quietly. The real danger is not salt alone. It is salt at the wrong time. In the morning, your nervous system is shifting from rest to action. Blood vessels are adjusting to gravity. Blood pressure is recalibrating. Introducing sodium during this fragile transition creates a violent internal imbalance. Researchers have documented that sodium sensitivity increases with age, meaning the same amount of salt causes a much greater rise in blood pressure in older adults than in younger ones. What once seemed harmless becomes lethal over time. And here is the part no one tells you. Reducing sodium later in the day does not undo morning damage. The spike already happened. The vessels were already stressed. The injury was already written into the tissue. Prevention must happen before the spike. That means delaying sodium until hydration and circulation are restored. When the body is properly hydrated, sodium can be managed. Water dilutes sodium concentration. Potassium helps balance it. Blood vessels relax instead of constrict. But when sodium arrives first, it dominates the system. This is why cardiologists quietly advise stroke risk patients to avoid salty breakfasts, even if their overall daily sodium intake seems reasonable. The body remembers timing. Timing becomes destiny. One of the most frightening truths is that sodium-driven strokes often happen without warning symptoms. No pain, no discomfort, just sudden loss of speech, movement, or consciousness. Families describe the same moment again and again. They were fine this morning. They were not fine. Their blood vessels were under attack. And it began with breakfast. The solution is not extreme restriction, it is intelligent sequencing. Hydrate first. Allow blood to thin. Allow vessels to open. Support nitric oxide. Only then introduce food, whole foods, natural foods, low-sodium foods, fruits, oats, unsalted nuts, eggs without processed sides. These choices protect the brain instead of assaulting it. The difference between safety and catastrophe can be one meal, one habit, one overlooked label. Sodium is not evil, but when misused, especially in the morning after 60, it becomes one of the most powerful accelerators of stroke risk known to medicine. The tragedy is that this risk is completely invisible until the moment it becomes irreversible. But the opportunity to stop it appears every single morning. And it begins with understanding that what you eat first does not just fuel your day. It programs your blood vessels, pressures your brain, and quietly decides whether you remain independent or whether your life changes in seconds forever. Inside your body, there is a microscopic gas that may matter more to your survival than any vitamin, supplement, or medication you have ever taken, and yet most people have never heard its name. Nitric oxide. It is invisible, fleeting, and produced in tiny amounts, but it controls whether your blood vessels open or close, whether blood flows freely to your brain or struggles through narrowed pathways, and whether a clot forms quietly or is swept away before it can do damage. After the age of 60, nitric oxide production begins to collapse, not suddenly, but steadily, silently, year after year. This decline is one of the most overlooked drivers of stroke, cognitive decline, and sudden loss of independence. When nitric oxide levels drop, arteries stiffen. They no longer expand easily. Blood pressure rises not because the heart is weak, but because the vessels have lost their ability to relax. Medical imaging shows that older adults with low nitric oxide activity have significantly reduced cerebral blood flow, meaning their brains are being slowly starved of oxygen every single day. Oxygen starvation does not cause pain, it causes damage. Brain cells begin to malfunction, reaction time slows, balance weakens, memory fades. These are not just signs of aging, they are signs of vascular suffocation. Nitric oxide is produced by the endothelium, the thin inner lining of your blood vessels. This lining senses blood flow and releases nitric oxide to keep vessels smooth and open. But dehydration, high sodium intake, inflammation, and oxidative stress all damage this lining. Once damaged, nitric oxide production plummets. And here is the terrifying part. The body does not warn you. There is no alarm, no sensation. The vessels simply narrow, little by little, until blood flow to the brain becomes critically compromised. Research shows that stroke risk increases dramatically when nitric oxide availability drops because platelets become stickier and blood vessels lose their protective anti-clotting surface. Without nitric oxide, blood behaves differently. It clumps. it slows. It collides with vessel walls instead of gliding smoothly. This creates turbulence, and turbulence creates clots. Most ischemic strokes begin this way, not with drama, but with microscopic failures repeated thousands of times. The morning hours are the most dangerous because nitric oxide is already at its lowest point when you wake up. Overnight fasting, dehydration, and oxidative stress suppress nitric oxide production. At the same time, cortisol rises, blood pressure surges, and arteries are asked to handle sudden demand without their primary relaxation mechanism. This is why stroke incidence peaks in the morning worldwide. The system is unprotected at its weakest moment. What makes this even more devastating is that modern habits accelerate nitric oxide destruction. Processed foods generate free radicals that neutralize nitric oxide before it can act. High blood sugar stiffens endothelial cells, blocking nitric oxide release. Smoking, inactivity, and poor sleep further reduce production. Over time, arteries become rigid pipes instead of living, responsive tissue. When a sudden pressure spike occurs, the vessel cannot adapt. It cracks, or a clot lodges, and the brain suffers irreversible injury within minutes. Brain tissue has no backup oxygen supply. Once deprived, neurons die rapidly. This is why strokes steal speech, movement, and memory so suddenly. But the damage began long before the moment of collapse. It began when nitric oxide quietly disappeared from the system. The most shocking discovery in vascular research is that nitric oxide loss is reversible, even later in life. Blood vessels can relearn how to relax. Endothelial cells can recover function, but only if the environment allows it. Hydration restores blood volume, reducing shear stress on vessel walls. Potassium-rich foods counter sodium's tightening effect. Antioxidant-rich foods protect nitric oxide from destruction. Dietary nitrates found in vegetables like beets, arugula, spinach, and celery are converted by the body into nitric oxide, directly restoring this critical molecule. Clinical trials show that nitrate-rich diets significantly improve blood flow to the brain within hours, not weeks. Hours. Yet most people are never told this. Instead, they are told stroke is unpredictable, genetic, or inevitable with age. That is not true. Aging increases vulnerability, but habits determine outcome. When nitric oxide is supported, arteries behave younger. Blood pressure stabilizes. Cerebral circulation improves. The brain receives the oxygen and glucose it needs to function clearly. Cognitive tests improve. Balance stabilizes. Stroke risk drops. When nitric oxide is ignored, the opposite happens. And here's the emotional truth no one wants to face. Loss of nitric oxide does not announce itself with pain. It announces itself with subtle losses, slight confusion, slower walking, a stumble that didn't used to happen, a word that won't come out. These are whispers from blood vessels struggling to keep the brain alive. Ignore them long enough, and they stop whispering. They break. The final insult is often small. A salty meal, dehydration, emotional stress, a sudden blood pressure spike. But the system was already primed for failure. The stroke was not sudden. It was the last chapter of a long, silent story written by nitric oxide depletion. The tragedy is that this molecule is influenced daily by choices that take minutes, not hours. Hydrating first thing in the morning, choosing foods that support endothelial health, moving the body to stimulate blood flow, breathing deeply to reduce oxidative stress. These actions protect nitric oxide-like armor around your blood vessels. Without them, the brain is left defenseless. Nitric oxide is not a supplement trend. It is not a wellness buzzword. It is the difference between blood that nourishes the brain and blood that destroys it. And after 60, protecting this invisible molecule may be the single most powerful act you can take to preserve your independence, your clarity, and your life itself.